I was listening to the story about, it was a story of a family in Washington, and the little boy called the Bigfoot the Cowboy Man. And he had, apparently it had made an effort to steal this kid. And it hit me. My children were in that playpen behind me with nothing but a mosquito net over them. It could have crept up behind me and taken both of my children, and I wouldn't have known.
Father just got like a Mustang or something from Wyoming, okay? He had it out in the corral because he couldn't put it in the barn in the stalls with the other horses. It would kick and made all the other horses nervous. Had a Seminole Indian working the horse trying to break it every day. So they had it out in the corral. This skunk ape snuck up behind this horse and grabbed it on its hind quarters. This particular horse kicks out, jumps over the corral, runs into the pasture, to get away. At this point, the rancher's out there just blasted away with the 30-30. Skunk ape runs into the swamp.
I went up there one day after that, or 2 days after that. I went up there and sat in the silence up there, and I'm telling you, man, it was free. It was crazy. There was a crazy vibe up there still. I did what I could to kind of get things under control, but I told her, I said, you need to get off this property. I feel like no matter how strong you are, it's almost like standing in the ocean. You can't stand still without moving your feet. You're going to get knocked over eventually, no matter how strong, whatever. You can't withstand a barrage of weird spiritual energy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Paranormal Odyssey. Glad to have everyone that is hanging out with us. Glad to have you guys join us. Those of you that are watching it live, those of you that will catch it later, certainly appreciate it. As you can see, I am flying solo tonight. Lisa has started a new movie and texted me about an hour ago and said that she was planning on making it, but got bombarded with like last minute stuff on the start of this movie. So she is wrapped up with work tonight. Told her not to worry about it. We will get through it. This isn't my first rodeo. I've done this a few times. Who we got with us tonight? Tea time with Tiffany. How are you doing, ma'am? Miss Moderator Extraordinaire. Thank you for all that you do. Miss Sandra Piper, of course. Naoma. How you doing, ma'am? One of my favorite people, Miss Naoma Finn. Carson, what's up, buddy? Kelly Shaw, thanks for hanging out, ma'am. That's all I see right now in the chat. Thank you, guys. Bunch of the usuals there. I appreciate that. All right, guys. As always, I want to ask everyone, if you have not done so already, please hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate that. If you have had an encounter and would like to come on and share it with me, I would love to talk to you about that. The first step in doing so is shooting me an email. You can get me at wayne@paranormalworldproductions.com. Even if you don't want to come on, if you just want to tell me I suck or doing a great job or my hat looks stupid or to shave or just whatever, I don't care. Just shoot me a text. Let me know. Love to hear from you. Guys, if y'all have any questions tonight, please feel free to send those. But, even more importantly, since I'm by myself, please put those questions in all caps. I will be on the lookout for them tonight by myself. So, like I said, it's even more important that you put those in caps, making it a little bit easier for me to see. And like always, guys, if I don't get your question, if I don't ask it, type it again. A few minutes goes by, just put it in all caps. And if I miss it, it's not on purpose, I promise. Guys, I want to ask everyone to head over to our website, paranormalworldproductions.com. Show some love to the other shows as well as this one. Sasquatch Odyssey, True Crime Odyssey. They are our new friends and co-workers, the Kentucky X-Files, and all that cool stuff. Guys, head over to the website and check all of that out. We would appreciate it. I might have to get those guys on. I've talked to Denny a couple times about coming on. I'm supposed to go on their show as well. Those are some cool guys over there. If y'all haven't checked them out, the Kentucky X-Files, let's see about getting them on. All right, believe I got all of that out of the way. Oh, let me just mention this real quick. Manimal Research, my Bigfoot research group. You have a Facebook group over on YouTube. If you are not a member, we'd love to have you. Head over there, Manimal Research on Facebook, and join up. Love to meet you. All right. Got all of that out of the way. I'll talk a little bit about tonight's guest. Got Miss Tory coming on. Tory is a paranormal investigator and an author. She's written quite a few books, and they're not like your typical fictional books, like made up stories, like most books that you get. She has put a lot of time and effort into these, and she's going to come on and tell you guys how they differ from a traditional book that you might pick up. So all of that being said, all of that out of the way, let's get Miss Tory on. Tory, how you doing, ma'am?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well, very well. Thank you so very much for taking the time to come hang out. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am.
I
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to give you a chance to talk about your books and how they differ from traditional fictional reading. You and I spoke a little bit about that. I'm going to get you to explain it to them, but before we get there, if you would just tell everybody how you got your start in the paranormal field and how long you've been doing it and all that good stuff.
Well, my start came from growing up. I grew up in a haunted house. I'm going to age myself here. It was back in the 80s. So, if, that was back when they didn't really have, a yellow page section for paranormal stuff. And it wasn't something that people really talked about, really. I live in the Bible Belt as well. So, people just didn't talk about those things. That wasn't something that people really spoke about, and if they did, it was a lot of like hodgepodge. It's like whatever. It was either that or you're crazy. So yeah, the house that I grew up in, I was probably around 5 years old when I moved in there, and lived there until all the way up until I was probably 16 or 17, right around. There was a lot of activity, shadow figures. Things would call my name that weren't there. Um, you know, I guess you would call it your stereotypical bumps and thumps and creaks and, the house settling or whatever you want to call it. I'm like, how much can a house really settle, right? That's actually where I saw my first shadow person. And I always tell this story because it's so, I've never seen anything like it since then. And I'll be 43 this year. So it's been quite a few years, and I still haven't found anything really in comparison to what I saw growing up in that house. The shadow figure that I saw, I remember the way that our house was set up. You had to like walk through this like dining room area, and off of the dining room area there was like this big long like great room, and you would basically turn the corner to go into the kitchen, and I glanced over and I saw this shadow figure standing there. And to me, I was probably, I don't know, somewhere around 12 years old. I'm sure it's probably changed on every podcast I've done, but right around 12-ish years old. And when I looked at this thing, it was standing in what I perceived to be an aggressive posture. It's very similar to like when like dudes get all fired up and they puff their shoulders out and their arms or whatever. It was standing like that, and it was so black that you couldn't see through it. It looked like somebody took a cookie cutter in the shape of a human and just stamped it out of the landscape. It was so black. I have not, like, that was the only time that I ever saw that there. I'd never seen anything like it since. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't as bad as like my 12-year-old brain thought it was. Not really sure. Never at any point was I ever hurt or touched or scratched, punched, kicked, whatever. I never got injured, but it was definitely very scary.
So would you say that was a shadow person?
I would say so, yes. Another interesting tidbit about that house, and I don't know if it's connected or not. It could be circumstantial, but the people that bought that house when we moved out, that bought it for my dad, the lady that lived there, she was only 40 something years old, I want to say, maybe early 40s. And she got a rare form of aggressive bone cancer, and she died in that house with yeah. So I don't know if that's circumstantial or not, but it is very odd. I will say.
Yeah, and I mean, you dated yourself. And you grew up in the '80s. I grew up in the '80s. Miss Tea Time with Tiffany there grew up in the '80s, a great decade. And you're right. You know, we have it so much better today. We can just pick our phone up and look up if we see or hear something that interests us. We can just pick up our phone, and we're a couple clicks away from finding out about it. But back then, I mean, I tell people how I got into cryptids was a lifelong interest in it. And what I had to do is I'd go to the library once a week at school, like we all did, and pick and check out some books, and I would take them back the next week. You know, that's how I got my information. My parents had a set of encyclopedias, but Lord, those are so big and intimidating. I didn't mess with those.
Right. Yeah.
Things are just so much more convenient today.
Yeah, like you have a lot more access to information than you did back then. And in fact, it was because of my experience in that house growing up that I created the Paranormal Help Desk, which I've had that probably 15 years ish, right around in there. And what I do is I find teams to investigate the homes of people experiencing hauntings, and I do it worldwide and free of charge. And I find teams that are local to them, and I send them. I basically I'm just the conduit between person that needs help and help. And
It's very, very cool. I've never heard
so
of anything.
I just basically set it up for them. I've I've gotten a lot of messages over the years, a lot of them, and I think that for like our average person, and like, we're into this. You and I, like, if something were to go down in our house, we would know where to go, what we needed to do, all of that
Right.
stuff. But then you have people that are victims of circumstance that have no idea what they've gotten themselves into, or you get, and I mean this in the most respectful way, but then you get amateur investigators that go out and they do stuff that maybe they shouldn't, and they get themselves into trouble, and they get there are consequences. Now, does everybody have those consequences? No, not at all. I'm just saying that it's a possibility, and I've had a few of those over the years as well. But your average person, I don't think, really knows where to go or how to find help if in the event that they were having something going on in their home. So that's why I made it. That's why I created it.
Very cool. Very cool. And we're going to give you a chance a little bit later on to tell people how they can get a hold of you and do that. But before we go any further, I talked a little bit about your books, and I think it's really, really cool what you're doing.
Thank you.
Tell everybody about your books and what all they're about.
Well, I am the author of what I call the We Are series. That's just what I call it. My very first book that I ever done was Malvern Manor. And to kind of give like a little backstory of like where these books come from and how ultimately the idea was set forth was I met Josh Hurd. He is the caretaker at Malvern Manor in Malvern, Iowa. I met him at a Kansas City Paracon back in 2019. And we spoke about Malvern Manor a little bit, and we were like, oh, well, I want to go down and check it out. So I did. And one of the first questions I asked Josh when I walked in there was, how many people have died here? Because I feel like people equate severity of haunting with the number of deaths that have taken place on a property. I think that people think that goes hand in hand. Not necessarily true, but not necessarily false either. But he's like, you know what? I honestly, I have no idea. For those of you that are not familiar with Malvern Manor, it's an old nursing home. It was originally built, the main part of the building was built in like the, I think, late 1860s. And it was like a boarding house. And then it turned into what they called the Cottage Hotel. And it operated as the Cottage Hotel until the mid 1950s. And that's where you see a transition into a nursing home setting. And then, so anyway, I went through and I started doing research. Now, the research for this book was actually done way before this was ever published. And I was thinking, I'm like, well, I have access to this and I want to share it. So that's where the We Are series is born. This is the original book I've done. This is We Are Malvern Manor. It's available on Amazon, Lulu. If you want the spiral copy, which I'll explain the importance of the spiral copy here in just a second, you have to buy it through me because they will not allow me to publish a spiral bound book. This is not, you cannot buy spiral bound on Amazon. Anything that you buy off Amazon is going to be a paperback edition, which it will look similar to that. This is Malvern Manor News. Actually, this is the paperback version of Malvern Manor. So I made these as basically a paranormal investigator's best friend and guide. I am a huge fan of memorializing the dead, and I also believe that as an investigator, if whatever I put out there, I want it to be positive, and if I can help facilitate communication between the living and the dead, then that I feel is a good thing. And not only that, but you get you have that correlation between people that we know existed and things that you're experiencing and names that you get. So with that being said, this is the layout. The spiral bound version was specifically thought of for paranormal investigators. And the reason why that is that if you're thumbing through this book and you're using it on an investigation, that whenever you open the book, it's going to stay open and it's not going to flop shut. These are made to mark in, to highlight, to make notes in. This particular book has a note section in the back that you can write notes. So when I was doing the research, some little research tips and tricks that I used like in college and things like that, I passed on to the book. So whenever you are doing any kind of paranormal investigation and you're using a communication device like an SB7 or a spirit box or Spiritus, whatever it is that you guys use, typically you get a first name. And so these are in alphabetical order by first name, and all of the names appear on the lower right-hand corner of the page. And that is so when you're flipping through your book and you're trying to find a name, you don't have to read each page to figure out where you're at in the book. So it makes it easier to find. If let's say that their given name is Thomas and they went by Tom, they are going to be in alphabetical order by Tom instead of Thomas because they would likely go by Tom when they were living. So in here, I went through and I found all the deaths that I could associate on property. In this book, there, I believe, is 184 deaths that I can prove. I also have a list that is on my spreadsheet of probably 40 to 60 more names that I'm sure died there, but I cannot prove that they died there. I can't because it doesn't specifically say it. Every death in this book is 100% proven to have happened on property.
Wow. So you have 184 names in there of people that actually passed away on that
in
property,
Malvern Manor.
and you
Yep.
talk a little bit about each person.
Yes. And each person, actually, this is a good one. I include everything that I can find. So this is Blanche Hammond. It has her obituary in there. These were public pictures that I found online. So I included a picture of her find a grave. This is what her tombstone looks like. This is where she's buried. If her plot number's on there, it's also included in here. But the goal is that, let's say that you're investigating and you get the name Blanche and you can confirm that it's this person, let's just say. In her obituary, it lists who she was married to, any children that she may have had, where she was born, where she died, where she's buried, major life events typically. So all of that is in there, and it's hopefully to be used as a tool, like, oh, well, I see that you were married to so and so. If she was married, let me see. Yes, she was married to R.L. Hammond. So you'd be like, oh, I see you were married to R.L. Hammond.
How cool is that?
Just being able to lead it. Yeah.
That's such a neat idea. I've never heard of anyone doing that before. That is so awesome.
Thank
Really,
you.
really cool of you to do. And as Tiffany commented here, it must have taken a lot. And kudos to you for being so thorough. And also, before we get any further, we had our first question, Miss Naomi. And I didn't want to interrupt you.
You're fine.
But, said, I know Malvern, Iowa is way out west, but I'm curious to know how far it is from Villisca. Now, I looked at your YouTube earlier, and y'all did a video on Villisca, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So how far away are the two?
It's only about 45 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
So seriously, like if you do like an overnight at Villisca, you could totally hit Malvern at the same, like on the same trip. They're only about 45 minutes away from each other. Yeah. But
how many of these books have you done?
I am getting ready to release my 7th one. I am currently working on We Are McIntyre Villa, and that's about McIntyre Villa in Atchison, Kansas. The second one that I did was We Are Edinburgh Manor, Edinburgh, however anybody says it. I just say it however it comes off of my tongue that day. I don't have a specific way because everybody says it different. My dog peeled out on this, that's why it's torn. But the cool thing is that all of these books are different, and I'll show you how. In Edinburgh, I always ask the locations, I always ask them, how many deaths do you have recorded? Or how many do you tell people? What is the number that you give people whenever they come through? And I make it my personal goal to find more than that. I think with Edinburgh, she told me, I want to say like 150. I found 234, I think, that died inside that building.
What kind of building was that? I'm not familiar.
Edinburgh Manor is in Scotchgrove, Iowa, and it used to be an old poor farm. A lot of people aren't familiar with poor farms. They never even knew they existed. Basically, the Cliff Notes version of poor farms is basically that was, their form of Medicaid back in the 1850s, all the way up until about 1950, 1960 is when they started phasing them out. A poor farm took care of what they call invalids, and that's like, they called them the deaf and dumb, and so crude. We would never say that today, but people that were blind, people that were deaf, people that were mentally handicapped, older people that couldn't take care of themselves anymore, that had different physical ailments, or sometimes a lot of psych patients would go there, or sick people with tuberculosis. So you would find a lot of like outbreaks.
Yeah, now it says poor farms were the American version of English workhouse. You always rely on Naomi to.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the times, there's several people in this book that lived there their entire life. Orphan kids go there. They
So basically, if
called it.
someone had like a mental handicap or a
Hmm.
disability, and the family just didn't want the burden
Hmm.
of raising them,
Yep.
they would send them to these
Yep.
places.
Yep. They would. And the poor farm, every county was required to have one. So every county had one. It was a requirement by the government, and they were like self-sustaining communities. So poor farms were typically around 150 acres, maybe more. It just depended on how big the poor farm was or how many people that they housed. That was very dependent, probably on the population, I would assume, but typically no less than 150 acres. They had their own farms, they had their own fruit trees, they raised their own pigs and chickens, and they would feed everybody at the poor farm off of everything that they basically farmed at their own farm. And
Now
then whatever they had left.
you
Huh?
said I'm sorry to interrupt you. You
No,
said
you're fine.
that it was required to have one poor farm per county. Now, was that a nationwide rule or a state?
Yes. Yes.
Nationwide?
Yeah.
Okay.
They I would It was a requirement by the government. I imagine there are probably about, I don't know, probably some counties that didn't have them if they were not very populated. I'm
Yeah.
not really sure, but for the most part, every county had one, and it was a requirement by the government to take care of their poor. And I mean, it was like Medicaid back in the day, um, a very crude Medicaid back in the day.
Yeah.
So the people that were at the poor farm that were able-bodied, they would work on the farm, and they would do all of the things. They would raise the cows and so on and so forth. The people that weren't, they basically just kind of hung out, and that's what it was. Um, but they have in this book, what's different is I have. Let me find one for you. I have death certificates in Edinburgh Manor. So, death certificates are certificates that are issued by the state when someone dies. They typically started doing them between 1899 to 1904. It just depends on which state you're from. In Iowa, in particular, they don't release death certificates until they've been dead for 75 years. So I only had access to death certificates up until about 1945, right around in there. So I was able to get a lot of death certificates for Edinburgh Manor. Malvern, I mean, it started as a nursing home at right around 1955. So I didn't get any of the death certificates for that. Like Kansas doesn't release them at all. Um, Whether or not they consider death certificates public domain is a state by state thing. It's not a requirement by any state. It's just whether or not the state wants it to be public domain. So Edinburgh has a lot of death certificates, and it's the same layout. It's alphabetical order by first name, and it appears in the lower right hand of the page. I also, in the back of all of these books, I have indexes that put them in alphabetical order by last name and order by year of death and month of death. And I do that so that people can do their own research and correlate information that is in the book with anything that they may be getting. There's census records, there's interesting news, so any news articles about the location while it was in operation are in here. What else? Census, obituaries, find a graves. I basically find everything that I can possibly find, and I put it on these pages for people to read.
Now, I'm curious with all of these names, these deaths that you're coming across. Granted, they were a long time ago. Have you ever been contacted by a family member of
I have
anyone?
not. I have not. I Fingers crossed. I have not, and I'm really hoping also with these books that people can use this as a genealogical tool. A lot of these people, I'll see if I can find one real quick as a reference. Some of these people didn't have families, and they didn't have like this person, Eunice Holton Beck. This was all she got.
Oh, wow.
A lot of these people didn't have anyone, and the only family that they knew were the people that lived within the institution with them, and this is this is all they would get for their death, if that. Not they didn't. Some of them didn't even get that. Um, some of these people, I found death certificates, so I know that they died there, but they had no kind of announcement or anything. And a lot of the find a graves. Um, Another interesting thing that, well, I don't know if anybody finds it interesting, but um, every person in my book that I write about, I go through and I fix all of their find a graves on findagrave.com. I upload their death certificates. I upload any newspaper articles that I find. I fix all of their dates, where they were born, if I can find it. And then I'll go through individually and connect any family members that I can find to them, so that if somebody is looking for them, that they have the information that they need to either confirm that that person is part of their family or not. So
That's really cool of you.
thank
And
you.
you've mentioned Find a Grave a couple of times tonight.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, tonight is the first time I've ever heard of it. So tell not only the listeners, but myself, what is Find a Grave and how do you use it?
Find a Grave is basically a worldwide database of graves. A lot of people go in there and they upload the Find a Graves of their loved ones. You get people that just go in there and do that because they're bored that day. I'm guilty. I do it too. I usually search cemeteries of like old insane asylums or poor farms, and I will go through and I will look at newspaper articles specifically for that person just so I can fix their stuff. People do that. I'm guilty. I do that. But yeah, it's a big national database. Let's just say, for example, one of the ways that I utilize it is, say that I get a name of somebody that passed away, or the name of a person that is related to somebody that I'm looking at. I will search that name in the Find a Grave database, and I will put in any information that I think would be pertinent. You can search like first name, middle name, last name, birth year, death year, and the location where they may be buried. I typically just put in their name information and I search. And then that's how I utilize it. And I go through and that's how I find most of these family members, to be able to connect their Find a Graves together, so that
Do most of them
they're,
have pictures of the grave?
most of them do, yeah. There's a lot of cemeteries where, or there's just a lot of graves in general where people have uploaded the information, but nobody's ever went out to the cemetery to take a photo of the grave. But for the most part, most of them do. Some of your older ones may not, simply
Yeah.
because the stone may not exist anymore. Poor farms, I think Edinburgh, they don't even know where the cemetery is for the poor farm.
That kind of leads into, I'm glad you said that. Tea Time Tiffany here had a question.
Yeah.
Um, talking about the poor farms. So the people who died there, did they have a special place that they were buried, or if they had family, were they buried with their family?
Typically, especially in the much earlier days, between like the 1800s up until, I don't know, like the early 1900s, for the most part, people were buried on the poor farm cemetery. Every poor farm had a poor farm cemetery. The poor farms were ran by the county, so the county was responsible for everybody that lived on the poor farm. So that means that they're responsible for like their medications, for their doctor's visits, for their clothing, food, water, and that also included burial. So to make it cheaper for the county, they put in typically cemeteries within their poor farm, and that's where they were buried. Um, I'll see if I can find this article. I because this is the only article in Edinburgh Manor that I ever found that adequately, for me, like puts things into perspective for people, for poor farms, and it's about burying their dead. Now, let me see if I can find it, because this is a big book. It is a very crude article. So this was written. This newspaper article that I'm taking out of page 262 right here. This was in the Wyoming Journal, and it was dated September 12th, 1895. And it says, so I was trying to find the spot where it said, when the last two interments were made, those of the ashes of Mrs. Bailey and Thomas, the gravediggers drove their spades into the coffins of other graves, and in one instance cut off the feet of a silent sleeper. So basically their cemeteries were so full that they were basically cutting other bodies in half and cutting off body parts of other dead, just trying to bury the dead that they were trying to put in the ground.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that kind of puts it into perspective on like how things went back then on the poor farm.
So they would dig down and not realizing they were digging on top of where someone was buried, and
yeah. It was pretty insane. Poor farms have a special place in my heart. I love poor farms. I think that the residents on poor farms definitely deserve to be memorialized. I don't have a copy of Randolph County Infirmary. I'm sure everybody's heard of Randolph County Infirmary in Winchester, Indiana. That was my third one. And I asked, how many do you guys give on tours? And they said, oh, we guess around 250, and I found 501. That book is a gigantic tome of a book. It is huge. It's almost 600 pages.
which one is that?
Randolph County Infirmary. It's called We Are Randolph County Infirmary, and that was the third one that I done. And that was an old poor farm.
How long does it take you to write one of these? I'm assuming that one took you quite a while.
Yes. Usually within these books, the research part alone is probably a good, and this is just a guess, probably 6 to 8 months, maybe 8 to 12, depending on how big. I have one portion of We Are Asylum 49, which is in Tooele, Utah. This is just the children's portion. This one is everybody of 18 and under that died in Asylum 49, and there's 1,200 people that died there. By far the biggest one that I've ever done, and I still have 4 more books to write for that one. So
1,200 children?
1,200 deaths. I'm not sure how many kids are in here. There's a lot of them. I mean, this book is 210 pages. But yeah, this is in Tooele, Utah, and this is just the children's portion. And also in the books, there's also in the books, there are like little Easter eggs. I call them like little Easter eggs that I have found like while doing the research in these books that that I just always wonder if people are going to put it together too, because it's really quite cool and quite sad all at the same time. I was trying to find this particular person here. In the Asylum 49 book, there was a woman, her daughter had passed away from a congenital defect. She was, I can't remember, I want to say she had muscular dystrophy or something of that nature. But anyway, she lost her daughter to that affliction, and then 2 weeks later she lost her toddler to pneumonia, and then 3 years later she committed suicide. And I always try to find ways to connect people, but I did point that out in this book. And
Now,
I've put mother's death certificate in here as well.
of all of the deaths that you've researched over the years while writing these books, have you come across any murders?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's I'm working, let's see. I'm trying to think of one in particular. I have looked at so many records over the years. There's a lot of rumors too, a lot of rumors, and I try to put fact into everything and everything that I can find. I There's definitely a lot of suicides. There are tales of murder. Do I think that I can prove them? No, because I don't, because the way that people documented back then in newspaper articles and things like that didn't um they I don't know. I guess it's the old fashioned way of covering things up, if I had to guess. For example, Inez Gibson, I couldn't find her death certificate. Inez Gibson is a spirit that resides at Malvern Manor. She's a 12-year-old girl. We know for a fact that Inez Gibson existed, and we know that she was found hanging in a closet by a jump rope. Um, but that did not happen at Malvern Manor. It happened across the street. That building no longer is up, I think. I don't think it's still standing. Um, we don't know why Inez Gibson is over in Malvern Manor. We have no idea why she's there. But her death was ruled an accidental death. People talked about it being suicide. She did have a pretty rough go at life. I mean, as a mother and just living this day and age, I find it hard to believe that a 12-year-old would do that. But, back then they were having babies at 14 and getting married, you know what I mean? So I feel like maybe the culture was different back then, and maybe they were a lot more grown up than 12-year-olds today are. I don't know. But yeah, their death certificates, I think, can kind of fudge basically what happened, because I guess in the grand scheme of things, nobody wants people to think that about their loved ones, that they did that to themselves. That's my best guess. I was trying to read through some of these comments. Oh wow, residential indigenous schools. Wow, that's insane. That's insane. See, now I'm a research nerd, so now my research brain is like, oh, yeah. Did we freeze? Oh, you're on mute. Can't hear you.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Now let's switch gears a little
Uh-huh,
bit.
for
You
sure.
do some paranormal investigating yourself, right?
I do. I do.
Let's I want to hear about some of those experiences that you've had. First off, let's talk about the most frightened you have ever been on an investigation.
The most frightened, actually, I mean, to be honest, the most frightened that I've ever been was in my childhood home. I don't think I've ever been that scared since. Now, I do get spooky, don't get me wrong. And to answer Carson's question, um, or no, Tiffany's question, no, I don't feel like I've ever had anything attached to me. For the most part, these books that I do is internet based. I am like Edinburgh Manor. I'm like 9 hours away from there. Randolph County Infirmary, I'm 12 hours. I usually have somebody that I work with. I talk to historical societies. I make a lot of phone calls. And I typically have somebody that I work with that if I need something from like the historical society or something, they will go get that for me. Those are the people that write forwards in my books, and they're usually really connected to the location anyway. Like Kat Armstrong, she did a lot of the legwork for Edinburgh Manor. She was my eyes and ears, and she did a lot of that. So I have not gotten, that was a very long response to that, but the short answer is no. But the scariest, the most scared that I've ever been was in my childhood home. I've been, some of my favorite places, some of the scariest places that I've been, where I've had a lot of activity. I would say my top three would be Malvern Manor, McIntyre Villa, and Garnett House in Garnett, Kansas.
Have you ever seen any apparitions?
I have. I definitely have. The McIntyre Villa in Atchison is very, very known for shadow figures. I can't wait. I did a new spot in this book, and you will see some of the stuff that people have caught over the years in that book. But McIntyre Villa is very well known for shadow people. I will share a picture that was submitted to me that's going in this book, and it'll give you kind of an idea of
Lisa here
like,
that says she got to investigate with you at the Axe Murder House.
yes, she's my bestie, my sister from another mister. She's amazing. But yes, she definitely, she knows that Malvern Manor's off the hook. Villisca's a good one. We had a lot of good luck there. But this is a picture that somebody caught at McIntyre Villa. I don't know if you can see him.
You can. I wish you would have sent me that so we could get it shared.
Well, you know, when I was thinking of pictures, I mean, it's not my picture. This was submitted by a guy named Brian, because I asked for people to submit their evidence photos, and that they would be given credit in the book, and that they're going to be in the book. So I didn't really think of it in that way because they weren't mine per se. But yeah, that.
It's went away. There you go.
Let me see. I'm going to.
That is, from what I could see, that is creepy as hell.
Yeah, that was caught in McIntyre Villa in Atchison, Kansas. This gigantic shadow man with glowy eyes. This
perfect way to describe him.
Yes, he looks giant, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So this was taken. That was taken on the second floor, facing out of the what we call the children's room. On the second floor, it's at the end of the hallway by the servant stairs. Anybody that's been there, they'll know what I'm talking about. But that's looking out that doorway down the second floor hallway. So that is in the hallway on the second floor at McIntyre Villa. So the story of that picture, what was going on, he has submitted for the book, and it will be in the book. So that's a new thing that I've done for this round of books, and I'm glad that I did, because I've gotten to see some really cool stuff.
Kelly Shaw is asking, when we're talking about apparitions, do you think they're apparitions or echoes from the past? Just your opinion.
I think it just depends. I do think that there's residual things, and I do think that there's intelligent things. That one in particular, I think, is an intelligent thing. A lot of the things that happen at McIntyre are very interactive, and that actively communicate. There's a lot of whistling, a lot of children. We don't know where all these children came from, but there seems to be a lot of children. People like this little boy that talks in an accent. He's an unknown male spirit. He's like, hello. That's how he comes across on EVPs, and he'll say, you can't catch me.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool interaction. And then we have the angry man, and he'll tell you to shut the fuck up on EVP. Huh?
Call him the angry man?
I call him the angry man. I don't know who he is. I don't know what his name is. but he's very crabby, and he doesn't like it when you're loud. So,
And where's the angry man at?
the angry man, I want to say he is all throughout the building, but mainly in the basement on the second floor, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Which building is that?
I'm sorry.
Which building is that? Which location is he at?
McIntyre Villa in
McIntyre.
Atchison, Kansas. Yeah. And she's only probably like 8 blocks from the Sally house, right around in there. I visited the Sally house when I went there. So, on the scale activity, and this may be surprising, but this is my own personal experience, and I don't know, other people may have different experiences. This is just mine. The Sally house, by far, was probably the least active place I've ever been, hands down.
Really?
Well, I mean, I don't feel like people should not go there. I think you should definitely go there, but that was just my personal experience, and it may be different for other people. So
Yeah,
I've heard of other people having good luck.
A lot of things goes into an investigation too. You know, just like the mood of everyone there, and emotions running high, and stuff like that. I think a lot of things go into whether or not you get activity. Because I've interviewed ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, however you want to call them. I've interviewed them before that will try to antagonize the spirit to get a response. And I think maybe if you go in there not with that mindset, you might not going to get as much activity.
I can tell you from personal experience at McIntyre Villa, they respond very well to please and thank you.
Really? So they're polite.
They are. Well, everybody but the angry man, apparently.
He's just a dickhead.
Yeah, he is crabby, and he screams a lot. If anybody is interested in hearing some of the stuff that McIntyre Villa has to offer, I know Stephanie O'Reilly, the owner, she posts a lot of the things that she catches on their Facebook page. It's the 1889 McIntyre Villa. It's on Facebook. But she posts a lot of the things that she captured. She just posted, I think yesterday, on the second floor. She has cat balls everywhere because they like to light up cat balls. And on her security camera, because she's got security cameras all through there, it shows this cat ball that sits on the shoulder of like a doll that's on the second floor, and you can see the cat ball catch air. It like flings off of the shoulder. It just goes whoop, onto the floor, and it starts lighting up when it hits the floor and rolls off. But you can see the force behind it, and she posts stuff like that all the time on there.
A question from Carson. Carson wants to know, do you have spiritual protection as you investigate?
I don't typically do that. I have no good reason as to why I don't do that. I guess I've just never felt like I needed to. I guess in my brain, the scariest place I've ever been was in my own home growing up. And I don't know if it can get any worse than that. You know what I mean? And I'm still here. So, but no, I don't typically do any kind of spiritual protection. There have been times where I get overstimulated and overwhelmed, so to speak. I don't know if every investigator does that, or I don't know if that's what people label being affected or whatever. I have saged myself. I have done the whole Palo Santo stuff, but very little. Like, I don't do that very often. So no, I don't. I probably should.
One question that I ask every paranormal investigator that I interview, and I know that my audience has to be tired of hearing me say this, but I'm going to say it again because it's relevant.
I love it.
One thing that has kept me from doing what you do as far as paranormal investigations, going out looking for ghosts. One thing that stopped me, because I'm interested as hell in it. I like creepy stuff. I like going into creepy places and stuff like that. But the reason I don't is I'm terrified something's going to grab on and latch on to me, and I'm going to bring it home to my loved ones. Has that happened to you or someone that you know?
No, it has not. Not anybody that I've known personally. I will say this with a lot of confidence. In all the years that I've been involved in the paranormal, as far as I know, a lot of people are afraid of demonic entities. And I think that people tend to use demonic synonymous with angry, like the angry man. I feel like some people would um, label him as demonic. I mean, people may look at that shadow man that I just showed you and be like, that's demonic. Well, not necessarily. I do think that like demonic things exist, but I think that our odds of coming across that are very, very slim, and so slim that it's probably non existent. In the 15 years that I've had the paranormal help desk, I can only think of one case that I think may have been demonic, but then again, I don't really know, simply because when people are scared, they tend to embellish things, and they don't do it on purpose. It's just because they're scared. And when you're in the middle of something happening to you and it's scary, your brain remembers it completely, not really completely different, but it attaches um I feel like, in a weird way, if this makes sense, it attaches severity to it, and you're like, oh God, like it cussed at me, and that must mean that it's demonic, you know. And it's not. I mean, it's not logical, but at the time, it's like you don't know what's logical and what's not. Because I mean, if we're talking about being logical, then this wouldn't be happening. I mean, in most
Right.
people's standards. So I mean, like I said, I just don't feel like demonic cases are, I think they are very few and far between. And when they do happen, people like you and I are not going to be the ones dealing with it, and we're not going to be the ones seeing it. It's going to be somebody, because I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing that we're going to do to fix that, period.
I,
Um, as far as like attachments, I think there's like different levels and different maybe some attachment severities. Um, do I think that you're going to get an attachment? Probably not, unless you're sensitive. People that have abilities, mediums, they tend to take home what I call hitchhikers. And those are just like the spirits are, they're like, oh, well, she can see me and she can hear me and we can communicate. And shit, I haven't talked to anybody in 120 years and I'm fucking bored. You know what I mean? So, like, I think like your mediums and things like that are more likely to get attachments, and I wouldn't even necessarily call it an attachment. I would say that it's just kind of a hitchhiker, and they'll go on their way whenever they get bored. I don't. There are cases where people get themselves into trouble, yes, but I feel like just going into your run of the mill paranormal location, you'll probably be just fine, and I don't think that you'll get anything from it. Now, if you go into a place that has, you know, people are getting scratched and punched and pushed downstairs, and you
yeah.
open yourself up to that negative type of stuff, I think your odds are increased. But do I think that you'll come out of it with an attachment? Probably not. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Tori, tell everybody where they can, well, first off, get a hold of you if they want to have like their home looked at, like you spoke earlier, and then tell everybody where they can get your books and where they can find you.
Yeah, if anybody needs help with a haunting, you can look up the Paranormal Help Desk on Facebook. I got my Facebook page. You can shoot me a message. I'm the only one that runs that, so you would be talking directly to me. As far as me, you can look up Tory Westhoff on Facebook. Um, and you will see me. That's the best way to get a hold of me typically. I am part of a group called Mirrored Souls Paranormal with my girly Sarah Joe. So you can look at Mirrored Souls Paranormal on Facebook and get a hold of me there. I am seriously lacking. I do not have a website up yet. If you want a spiral bound copy of one of my books, just message me directly on Facebook. If you can't find my personal profile, then you can message Mirrored Souls Paranormal, and I will get you a link to purchase the Spiral Bound. All of the paperback copies are available on Amazon, so you can buy those there. You don't necessarily need me to purchase those. We're also on the Lulu bookstore.
And if you can't find Tory on there, you're welcome to get a hold of me, and I can get a hold of her and get your information that way. So I think what you're doing, Tori, is really, really awesome. It's very cool. I've never heard of anyone doing that, and I think it could be a very, very, I think it is a very useful tool for people that are going to be investigating these homes. I mean, they're already a couple steps ahead if they have your book in. I think it's really, really awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about them, because I am so excited about them. And I'm just excited because I'm excited to share the information, some of the really cool things that are in there, and just the people. I love people. I just love it. And I love just putting that information out there so that their stories are not buried behind decades of newspaper articles. And I feel like
that's another very cool thing that you're doing, giving these people that have been long gone, like not bringing them back to life, but kind of giving them one last voice,
Yeah. And I will say, like Edinburgh, I found a kiddo that had drowned in their pond back there. I can't even tell you when. It was a long time ago, back when it was a poor farm. They went out there swimming and drowned. And Kat Armstrong, she does a roll call every month while she's there, and she actually spoke to that kiddo. And that was the first time in all of the time that she's had this book that she got a response from that little kiddo that drowned. I say little, he was like 18 or something like that, but he's little to me because I'm old. But yeah, so it's very tedious. But like I said, I'm still working on McIntyre Villa, and I've been working on it for quite a long time. So I'll be excited to get that up.
All right, Tori, ma'am. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for taking the time on this Friday evening to come and hang out. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. If you don't mind, hang tight after I'll put you off here. Sure. I'll holler at you in just a minute.
All righty.
All right, guys, there you have it. Very interesting stuff. As I said, I think it's an amazing tool. What she's doing is very, very cool, and you're already a couple of steps ahead if you have one of these books and you're going in to investigate that property. Really, really cool. And I was talking to Tiffany about this a little while ago. I think Friday nights is probably the wrong night for us to be doing these shows, because the audience number was down again tonight. It seems like Fridays, the number of you guys that watch it is low, but any other night, the one we did this past Sunday with Dave from Florida, 3 times as many people were in there, and I didn't promote that show at all. I promoted this one pretty early today, started putting it on several pages, and I just think people are out on Friday nights. It's date night for a lot of couples, and they're just not catching it live. So in the future, I might look into changing the night that we're going to do this. Y'all have any feedback? I'd love to hear it. Let me know what you think. All right, guys. That is enough of all of that. Another good show. Thank everyone for their participation. Those of you that came and watched it, great questions, great comments, all that good stuff. Jordan and I are leaving in the morning for vacation. We're headed to the beach, so I'm going to be there I'll actually be back in time for next week's show. So be back next Friday. So I'll see y'all then. But keep us in your thoughts and prayers for safe travels and all that stuff. Guys, y'all be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. And I'll see you next time. Bye.